That's fine. You got to get one. Welcome to the Smash Controllers podcast. Today, I have very special guests, Sandy Dingo Games. I met them over at DreamHack Atlanta real quick. Had a small convo, but I wanted to save some of the bigger questions I had for the podcast. And before we get started, I want to ask you guys, like I ask every other guest, what's your first video game memory, and what's the first game that made you rage quit?
First game that made me rage quit. I don't know. Like, first video game memories are like, for me, it's watching my older brother play Mega Man 2. This was like probably 1995, 1996, something like that.
Yeah,
So I was like 3 years old, and I was just in the process of forming memories, like where
got
I could
you.
actually like I can still look back and think about that. But yeah, it's watching my older brother play Mega Man 2. I don't know about rage quitting. I've definitely broken controllers in the past, but I don't know what the first time I did it was.
That's the same thing that got you to that point where it's like, you know what, crunch.
Some of the worst rage quits I had was before I could even get into the game because
Uh,
I had a broken PlayStation 2 when I was a kid. And so like the disc would read correctly maybe like one out of every 50 times that I tried.
wow.
And so I would be like sitting there with my PlayStation, like turning it on, putting the disc in, it wouldn't load, and then I'd redo that process over and over, and then
Mm,
I'd give up. So I don't know if that's rage quitting.
I think for me, I'm trying to remember. I think my first game memory is probably like watching. If it's me playing, it was probably Red Alert. Like I was watching my uncles play Red Alert, the first one,
okay.
and then I got to play a little bit. And I think that was the first time I was like, "Oh my god, you can play video games."
Hmm, okay.
Rage quit's hard. I don't know. I do have a vivid memory of playing like Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal on the
Uh,
PS2, and like I forget what I was doing. I haven't played that game in forever. I I don't think I threw the controller,
mm,
but I definitely I was upset. I don't remember what I was trying to do.
understandable.
So it was Ratchet and
Understandable.
Clank.
Yeah.
Nice.
Understand.
My first video game memory was playing Age of Empires with my dad on one of those plastic Macs. You know, the
Mm,
colorful plastic
Oh
Macs?
hell yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the first game that I played.
So like that see-through plastic or something
Yeah.
on the back. That's
Yeah.
cool.
They had handles too.
Still
what?
such
Yeah.
We still have one.
Do you remember what color it was?
It was green, I think.
Ah, there you
Yeah.
go.
And the first time I rage quit was playing Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. This is the first thing that I remember.
Mm,
But it was the section, if you remember this, where you first get on the pirate ship and you have to learn how to swing on the rope and go
yes.
from
Yes.
platform to platform. And I could not do that. And I got so mad that my grandpa basically turned the GameCube off. Like I couldn't play anymore.
Oh, you just unlocked a core memory for me too, but it was Prince of Persia on
Yeah.
like running on like Windows 98, like the
Mm,
really old side scroller Prince of Persia.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was my first rage quit memory was trying to jump over the spike traps.
That you said that and it reminded me. I played it one time. It was Aladdin for Sega Genesis, and the game was just
Wasn't that
unbearably
like
difficult.
notoriously like
Yes,
really,
yeah,
really difficult?
yeah. But I played it at a cousin's house, so I'm thinking, I seen the movie. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a breeze. No, no,
Aladdin got through this no problem.
right? No. Oh my god, one touch, that was it. But you know, Sandy Dingo Games. What is Sandy Dingo? Like, what is that? Where you
All right.
from?
Let's unpack this. It's time for therapy.
Basically, we had a Facebook group. This was like probably 2012.
You can't tell them about that face.
We had a
You can't tell me anything about it.
and it was just like a group of friends that we got together and played airsoft and like did LAN parties and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I named the Facebook group one morning. It was like Operation Sandy Dingo, and I just made that up because I thought it sounded funny. And yeah, it just kind of stuck,
Okay.
and that's why we named our company Sandy Dingo Games.
Okay.
The idea of Sandy Dingo evolved a lot
Yeah.
over many years. It was like a joke group. Then it turned into like a twice a year, let's all go to the cabin in the mountains and hang out and like drink and party and just have a good time with friends.
Yeah.
And then it turned into like, oh, let's name our company Sandy Dingo.
Well, And I think if thinking back to it, it really was like, so we did these LAN parties there, and one of the first projects we worked on was a mod.
Yeah.
And like, what ended up happening was like we put all this time and effort into it because we wanted to make something cool for our friends to play
Pretty
like,
much
at that event. So it
Right.
is kind of like, I guess, poetic that we
Yeah. We
named
created
the
a video
company
game
after
for
that.
the friends party.
Yeah. That was kind of our first kind of group effort, and other people were helping on us on the mod with us, but it was really just us by the end.
Yeah, like the
Like-
first, like the snow level that we made at the beginning, like that first song that we made had all of us singing into a microphone. Like we were group singing, and I did the bass, and then Dillingham did like the rolling piano part in that song. But that was like the first, I don't know, 2 months of making that mod.
Mhm.
We made that mod over the time period of like what, 4 years?
I mean, it was like we were in college, we had jobs. It
Yeah.
was very
Yeah.
like
Super sparse part time, but like I would pack my computer into the passenger seat of my car.
Mhm.
And if you're from Georgia, you know where Gainesville's at. It's like an hour north of Atlanta. So I would
Yeah.
I would buckle up my desktop computer in the front seat of my car and like drive all the way up to Gainesville, and we would have like 3-day long blurry crunch sessions where we just like lose track of time and memories, and it was fun. But
I didn't lose track of memory. You guys, I was totally sober.
look, we all contributed, all right?
You guys just multifaceted like that. You go from Sandy Dingo sounds funny to this could really be something. This is really something now.
the power of small things and the impact that they have over time. Like it becomes part of the legacy, like part of your story, I guess.
Right.
And the power of friendship.
The
Yeah.
power of friendship.
Like you work on anything with 2 other people for that long, and once it's over, you're wondering, okay, what are we going to do next?
Yeah.
Because you know you can work together, so why not try to keep doing that?
Yeah, it basically made us realize like how much we could trust that the other 2 people are not going to flake out. Basically, like, we all have our own ebbs and flows of like how much effort we want to put into a certain amount of like week-long process, like if we're working on a piece of the project. But yeah, pretty much all of us the 3 of us pull through every time.
That's a good squad right there. A good 3-man squad right there. So before I continue forward, like how did you guys meet? Like were you friends, childhood friends, or we met in college? I met him first and he brought him along.
Yeah. So we all went to the same high school together. We're all 30 now.
Mhm.
Graham's 31. I'm turning 31 in 7 days. That's gonna be
Hey,
exciting.
happy early birthday.
Yeah, David's doxing himself right now.
Oops, shouldn't have started a company.
It's actually true.
Yeah, it's like move to the Cayman Islands. No, we all went to the same high school together. Graham and I like met each other but didn't become good friends in high school.
Mhm.
John and I shared a lunch table together senior year of high school. And then like Graham, I guess you were really the catalyst that sort of brought us together more than anything, because like it's not like I was hanging out with you after school or anything, John, at that point.
Yeah.
But like freshman year of college, first semester of college was sort of when things really started to get stitched together. I would say Graham is the mastermind of that, more or less.
Okay.
I do remember riding the bus with Graham.
Graham
Graham and I
down
have
the street from me.
we have good memories. Actually,
They grew up in the same
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Because like
Okay.
I've known Graham, I guess, since middle school.
Mhm.
I feel like I wasn't really friends with you. Like I wasn't. I talked to you and like we shared like a sense of humor and like randomly played games, but I feel like I wasn't actually like really good friends with you until after high school.
For sure, but I do have that vivid memory of being on the bus and
Yeah.
talking about making games.
Yeah,
And
actually.
just being like, yeah, if I ever want to do this for real, I'm gonna keep that guy in.
Yeah, and for me it was like I'd mentioned to you probably, Graham, before I saw your notebook.
The
But
notebook.
I mentioned to you that I make music and sounds and stuff,
Yeah.
and like that probably like sent a
we had a
sent signal into
conversation. I
your head.
remember this. It was about Skyrim and how like the music in that game is, and you talked about wanting to make video game music.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like literally 13 years ago at this point. Like,
I didn't realize how into it you were, though, until you and I sat at that lunch table at college with Cress, and you had a notebook with you that was like scribbled ideas and
I didn't
drawings
even know
and
how to program
concepts of
anything at that
games.
point. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know. I knew like basic Java.
Yeah. And it was like when I saw you pull that notebook out, and he was like, oh, he's into this. Like,
Yeah.
this could be my out. All
I'm,
this
no-
years ago.
I'm noticing a pattern here. I'm gonna keep that guy in mind when I want to make it.
Much, yeah. But that all sort of like coalesced together in like 2012, like mid to late 2012 is when things really started to come together,
Mm.
and that's when we formed like the where the names came from, and just kind of snowballed from there. Yeah, shit, 12 years ago. Yeah,
So-
almost 13.
All right. So your first project together was a mod.
Yeah, it was for a game called Hammerwatch. It was like a multiplayer co-op, like isometric dungeon crawler roguelike game.
Kind of like Gauntlet, but
Yeah.
more
Okay.
pixelated and like simpler.
Hammerwatch is good.
Yeah,
It is
they
a
have
really good
they have a
game.
couple of games out. Like they have a roguelike called Heroes of Hammerwatch, and then they're making Heroes of Hammerwatch 2. And
Yeah.
I highly recommend that.
And they're making Hammerwatch. Is Heroes of Hammerwatch is the one, the playtest that we did, right?
Heroes of
Yeah.
Hammerwatch
2. Yeah. Shout out to Hammerwatch. They're awesome.
Shout out him.
Yeah, we made a mod for that game because they had a level editor that the main dev on that game. There's two main devs, but one of them doesn't actually know how to program. So the level editor was made by the programmer so that this guy could make levels. And that was really like kind of that was how we cut our teeth in terms of like content production and just learning how to work together and like learning stuff like version control, figuring out weird engineering problems within the mod. Cause like there was this in the level editor, there was this weird like node based scripting language.
Uh-huh.
Some of the stuff that I built with that was like looking back on it, it was so ridiculous. I should have just worked in like Unity or something like that. But I thought it was really cool. Like I thought it was like, we had to finish.
That project never really got scoped down the way it should have. Like we never really took time to cut scope seriously on that project. We just kept going.
We only
It's kind of funny. Like
But it's a really, really cool mod, and it's like it's one of the top mods on the Steam Workshop for Hammerwatch. Yeah,
it was the top one for a while, but
what was the mod?
It was called Dingovania. It was like
it's still there.
It's like, okay, take a game that's supposed to be a dungeon crawler and try to use that to make like Skyrim.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
We made like a multi-zone, like open world with a huge overworld zone. Like we basically just tore that game apart.
It is a buggy mess. We're allowed to cuss?
Hey, this is your episode. Whatever you want to say.
It was a fucking mess. It was so buggy. I mean, you could still play it.
Yeah.
Like it's super buggy. But yeah, it's I don't know. We learned like too much from it.
Yeah.
We should have moved on faster, but yeah.
Okay, so after the mod, what happens is that you're like, we created a game. We can create our own game. Is that like the next step, or?
There was like a long period, I feel like, after that where like
we did Fasteroids pretty soon around that.
Yeah, but
around
Fasteroids was a school thing. I
mean, it's a mobile game.
I feel like there was a period where we were trying to figure out what we were gonna do, and we like
graduated from college,
and then like I feel like everybody, we kind of got like split apart, but we ended up, there was this idea that we wanted to make another game.
We got big boy jobs, some of us or all of us. It's like we're just like,
we're missing a crucial part of the process here, because it was like there was also the modding competition. So the guys who made Hammerwatch, they made a different game called Serious Sam's Bogus Detour.
The Serious Sam IP is huge. It's been around a long time.
Devolver Digital published that, and they had this modding competition for that game. And because we knew so much about how that engine worked and how to mod it, basically the developers were like, hey, you should submit something for this. We think you'll do really well. And so we made this game, or this, I guess you could call it a game. It was a mod for that game, but it was kind of like a reskin, and like it had our own spin on things. It was a game called Chassis, like the race car chassis. But they were basically robots, a lot like the robots in Micro Relic. But it was all pixel art, and it was kind of like a horde based, like you had to go out and find this part of the map and like survive and then like unlock that part and then go to the next part. It was kind of like this zombie survival take, but it was a lot of like robot themes.
Gotcha.
And that won that competition. And that was our first like we made money at it. Like we won like I think $2,000. At that point was like that was crazy, but
yeah, it was wild. Winning that competition was awesome. And like Graham said, it's like the robot characters from Chassis, like that's sort of where that initial I guess inception of
yeah.
the robots for Myco Relic really started.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we were going to do it in pixel art.
Yeah, we were.
I
and then
just
like
really wanted to make a Bionicle game.
yeah,
And I was like, guys, we have to make a Bionicle game.
yeah. That's the other like key part of what kind of moved us into, I guess, the themes of what Myco Relic is like the three of us all as late 90s kids and early 2000s kids loved Bionicles. We all had collected them, played with them. It's like, it's one of those things where it's just like core memories for us.
Right.
Yeah.
And being such a like strong IP for us nostalgic wise, but then also like it's the theme of tribal robots. Like you just don't see that theme often, I guess, outside of like what Horizon sort of.
Yeah.
It's like that's tribal robot-esque, but not exactly.
Tribal humans with
robot
dinosaurs.
Yeah. It's like adjacent, but yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's just we think the theme is super cool and it resonates with us from a nostalgic point of view.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we can't be the only ones. And it seems like every time I go into like a public game development Discord and I'm streaming my screen working on the game, someone always comes in and is like, this reminds me of Bionicles. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, so since we're already talking about it, Myco Relic, how did it come about? Why the name Myco Relic? You know what I'm saying? Like
That's actually, it took us a long time to pick a name. And I'm still on the fence about it, but I think it's just like we have to send it.
Yeah, I think we just have to.
Yeah,
I don't
have a choice.
But I think it came about from the ashes of the chassis mod, because that was like that had the robot theme, and we kind of cut our teeth a little bit more on that. And like I think the game itself, we started in Unity just to mess around, because it
real
like
quick,
that was
Unity is like a programming.
It's a game engine.
Okay, game engine. I'm
So
sorry.
right now it's like Unity and Unreal and then Godot are like the three main sort of like engines that that are easily accessible.
There's Game Maker too, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of game engines, but yeah.
But we're not making our own engine, but we did start in Unity, and John learned how to 3D model like basically since that. I guess it's been 6-7 years.
You spent a long time just slowly chipping away at 3D modeling,
Yeah.
like just teaching yourself.
But we started like we moved to Unreal, I think, because we wanted to do multiplayer. And that was kind of the roadblock, is like I hit a point in Unity where I felt like I was not skilled enough to do it by myself, like program the multiplayer alone. And I was looking into plugins and stuff like that, but it just felt like that was the deciding factor. And then I discovered Unreal and more or less had a multiplayer prototype set up in like 20 hours of work or something like that. Like it was pretty fast. And that's kind of the springboard, is we've just been iterating on that build over and over again for like the past 3 years. And a lot of that has been me teaching myself how to use the engine.
We've all been teaching ourselves in different ways, just to kind of like craft our own little chasm where our niche is in the game engine.
Gotcha. Was adding multiplayer hard? Because I know some people I've talked to, there was like, player was a whole different beast. I don't want to touch it. Some people was like, nah, you just kind of boom, boom, boom. Like, how did multiplayer come for you guys?
So I think adding it, like if you were to add it late in development, it'd be fucking hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were to start with doing that in mind, and you were doing it, or at least for us, in Unreal, I don't know. I think for sure it adds complexity, but I don't think it's as hard as people think.
Got you.
My take is that I think it's easier than people think, but I'm also, that's like hindsight, and it's like that's me interfacing with it every single day for like this is my life now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like I can
if
I
you're
can pick it apart now.
if you're designing your game from the ground
Yeah.
up with multiplayer in mind from
Mhm.
day one of development. And I guess like in our case, because we were teaching ourselves how to use Unreal Engine and just how to make a game in general, like it was just sort of shoehorned into the way we talked about making a game.
Yeah.
Because it's like none of us really knew how Unreal Engine worked 4 years ago. So like because we just kept talking about multiplayer, that was part of the daily conversation that we had about what features we wanted to add, how we wanted things to work. And like Graham being our main programmer for the game, it's like he spent the majority of his time just looking at documentation, going through tutorials, going through all sorts of forums and posts, and like it adds a lot of work, but if it's there from day one, then it's not hard to like continuously consider it.
Got you.
Especially if you like play a lot of multiplayer games too. Like you get the idea of like how multiplayer functions in other games anyways. So like you have ideas in your head about what is a good feature versus what is a bad feature.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of pick things out from there.
Okay. No, kind of a little bit all over the place, but what's the story of Michael Relic? Like you sat down and you're like, all right, I want to create a story about boom, boom, boom with the character Bing.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna say like there's some stuff I don't want to talk about
Oh,
because
that's fine. That's fine.
it's
Whatever you
like
feel comfortable
spoilery
sharing.
stuff, and there's like I like the idea of having deep lore,
Mm-hmm.
but I will say that the theme is basically the idea of like terraforming that has gone wrong,
Okay.
and the idea of like sort of sentience and where sentience comes from, and like this sort of idea of post-humanism and like what it would be like if you kind of like what the perspective would be like from like a robot that is kind of infested with this thing that is controlling it, like what makes the whole thing, right? Like what's the difference between the parts and the whole, and like what like type of, I guess, the sentience that would come out of that, like how would that, I guess, like what does it mean to be human? I don't know, I'm kind of
Are you the fungus or are you the robot? You know, like there's a lot of
if you replace every piece of a boat, every wooden piece of a boat, is it still the same boat?
Exactly.
Right.
Got you.
It's like you're rebuilding your body in Myco Relic, you're changing out your body parts, but like the language that's used in Myco Relic is like you are the mushroom or the fungus inside of the robot. But when you're playing the game, you're like you feel like you're controlling the robot, so it plays on that kind of theme.
Yeah, because I
would also say like narrative wise, like we have a kind of narrative goal for the progression that the player has through the game in terms of the different like factions and why they're doing things that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily want to like explain that because I feel like that's part of playing the game.
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like I said, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. Because I noticed that when I played the demo, I was like, I was kind of asking myself like, am I the robot or am I the little I don't know, what would you call it? I almost say bacteria, but like the little fungus.
Well, it's fungus. It's mycelium.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah. Like the whole theme is like mushroom robots.
Okay.
Have you ever seen like videos of slime molds? There was an experiment.
I know, because I'm not sure. I don't want to say yes, but I don't want to say no. Like maybe in passing. Let me say in passing. I didn't actively type it in. Like in passing, I seen it.
Something I look up all the time.
Yeah, slime molds, dude.
A major inspirational point for me was this experiment that they did where they like mapped out Tokyo on like a plaque and then put food at all of the subway stations, and they put this slime mold in this dish with the map and the food, and it more or less aligned itself in a way that really kind of copied the layout of the subway system within Tokyo. And there was a few improvements that it made, but it got me thinking about like the way these sort of biological systems could interface with like mechanical or robotic systems, and like how that would, what that would really like look like. And like you have this theme's been explored in like The Last of Us with like cordyceps being this sort of zombie plague, and that's kind of inspirational for us as well. But it's like,
Or Scavenger's Reign.
Yeah,
Scavenger's
yeah.
Reign does a really
Mhm.
cool job integrating. I don't know if you've heard of the
Yeah,
anime.
yeah. I seen it on HBO Max.
You watched it? Yeah, so you know how the robot in the show
Oh, that
has
was
like
I can
the
remember
plant.
her name, but he was with the bald head lady.
Yes,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so like the plants, the mushrooms or whatever it is, started growing inside of the circuitry
Yeah.
of the robot
Yeah.
and giving it emotions and
Yeah.
feelings
Yeah.
and complex thoughts and like awareness of the ecosystem around it. And it's like it's actually like we watched some of Scavenger's Reign like
Mhm.
a year and a half or 2 years into developing Myco Relic.
Yeah, they were like, wait, this is us.
Yeah, this is
Like-
our story. What's going on here?
They stole my style. They stole it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very similar theme.
The art direction. It reminds me kind of like a cell shaded kind of look, like Jet Set Radio, Wind Waker, kind of like that. And that was intentional because you guys said you were doing pixel art or pixel
Yeah. So
before.
we started with pixel art because we were coming off of those moments.
Mm-hmm.
So like those Hammerwatch games were pixel art games. That's all the work I was doing. But then when we wanted to start in on Myco Relic, like I was originally like, shit, I've got to learn how to like do 3D. It's been like a lot of fun. But yeah, like my main inspiration for the art is honestly RuneScape.
Okay.
I love RuneScape so much. And I love that like it's almost like a celebration of like the shitty triangles. And it's almost like a like fuck the sort of like this is how you're supposed to 3D model and this is what's supposed to look good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just like throw that shit out the fucking window and like make this sharp, edgy, wobbly, messy thing that has like a lot of character.
Yeah.
You created like a tool that takes normal organized lines and like shifts them. So that whizzle effect, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like
I mean, it's literally just like take all the verts on the mesh and then like
shift
push
them a
them
little
in
bit.
random direction.
Like intentionally breaking art to make it just look a little bit wonky.
But yeah, it's supposed to be super stylized. And like I imagine some people look at it and they're probably like, this is not my vibe.
I mean, we had a guy comment. We've dipped our fingers into running ads, and this guy commented on one of them. I think through Facebook. I don't know. I don't know the context. He said that our game looked like dollar store trash.
Oh yeah,
And I want to print that
Put it up on a wall.
If someone takes the time out of their day to like say that, then you know that you're doing something right.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But it's like it's the same reason why I think, and you may have seen this if you're up to date on like a lot of indie game stuff on Reddit or Twitter or wherever. But like there's this resurgence of like the PlayStation 1 aesthetics that's happening now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of games that are trying to do this like very low poly, like where pixels are shifting around the screen as the camera turns, because it's like it's meant to give that same sort of nostalgia of like this is old crappy graphics. And there's always a taste for it in the in the gaming community.
Yeah.
Well, and we've found a middle point, I think, where like, we're taking advantage of some of the more like sophisticated Unreal like lighting stuff. So it's like the game. You look at the sunset and you're like, okay, this is like a modern game.
Yeah.
But then you look at like your character and you're like, Jesus Christ.
As I like looked at it, I personally enjoyed the style. It was kind of like a retro look to me from like what I remember growing up, but it ran smoothly. So it was like taking like a more modern kind of like pace, if that's the right word, with the older graphics, and it just kind of touched a sweet spot for me, and I was like, I like this.
Thanks.
So I know you said Bionicle was a very big inspiration. Are you guys into like? Because I saw some of the weapons, like the staff. It wasn't a staff, I forgot, but it was like
The spear.
it was a spear. It was a
Glaive?
spear, yeah. And
Yeah.
are you guys into like I guess I don't want to say fighting, but kind of like weapon mastery fighting, like master of all weapons, different type of nuanced weapons and stuff. Is that kind of like what you were going for, where you chose like to use a spear, or we're going to use a club, or we're going to maybe at some point use a sword or something, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
the sword is
It's just more animation work.
yeah, John's like
But it's like I'm literally like part of what I'm doing right now is making it easier for me to do more move sets.
yeah.
But yeah, like the sort of Souls like approach to where like you have like a lot of different weapon types, a lot of different move sets, and they fulfill some like niches is definitely the direction we're going. Yeah.
It lets players express themselves too, so they can find the weapon type that sort of just fits the pace that they want to play at. And it's like that risk to reward ratio is sort of different per weapon, depending on how much reach the weapon might do, or what type of damage, or like the quickness of the attacks, that sort of thing.
Right.
So it's basically like any other Souls-like game. You more or less find the weapon type that fits how you want to play. But we're not like Micro Relic doesn't give players a weapon in their hand when they start. It's like you start with your bare fists punching stuff, and then you find weapons as you progress. And so that's something that I guess we're doing a little bit differently. But more or less the concept's the same, because we love the Souls-like genre. We love the games that FromSoft's come out with.
Yeah.
How do you guys balance that? Like, is that a challenge to, like, let's say you want to use a spear, but like you don't want to put too many enemies in an area to where you can't use a spear, or
Yeah,
like how do
balancing
you
is
balance weapon and I'm sorry, a balance weapon and like enemy placement and such like
Yeah,
that?
like balancing is a never-ending fight
Mm-hmm.
constantly. I mean, you see it when a game like Elden Ring comes out.
Yeah.
They're still doing balance passes on enemies and AI and bosses and weapons.
Yeah.
And FromSoft also has to consider balance not only for PvE, but also for multiplayer PvE with co-op, and a separate weapon balance pass for PvP when you're doing the dueling arenas with other players too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the way that a weapon does damage is completely different from PvP to PvE in Elden Ring. We're not too worried about the PvP side of things. That community will form in itself whenever Myco Relic releases, and we can kind of approach it from there.
Gotcha.
Enemy placement is an interesting question, because we actually have to take count of how many players are in a server in the game,
Mm-hmm.
and we are able to spawn more enemies, or we're able to spawn, like, swap enemies out. Like, normally if you're playing by yourself, this enemy's an easy one to fight, but
Yeah.
if there's two people playing together, we swap that enemy out, so it's a harder one. It's a higher
Gotcha.
tiered version of that enemy, so it has more health, more poise, maybe looks different. And that sort of balance, it's like it's fun, but it's tricky. Or we'll implement a single feature into the game. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're right now we're messing around with like a knockback, or like a stagger, where you get thrown onto the ground in the
Mm-hmm.
game, and that changes the actual flow of combat, because now all of a sudden you can get knocked onto the ground if you get hit when you're staggered,
Or you get knocked off a ledge, and it's like, now I have to make this
Yes.
section of the map different, and
So, like, suddenly with one new feature added to the
Yeah.
game, all of a sudden the previous balance is like, oh, now we got to change like these 8 enemy types so that they don't do this amount of poise damage with these hits. Like, it's a never ending fight, and it's one of those things that we're going to be balancing the game well into post release as
Right.
well, based off of player feedback and watching people play. But like, we have an active playtest right now that's up live on Steam,
Mm-hmm.
and so, like, we get to watch people play the game. We get to
Yeah.
see how people approach different challenges, different encounters, and then tweak it live. Like, I have someone play testing on one window, and then I'll have the game editor open on the other window, and I'll like see this player like get confused or make a poor decision, or maybe I just don't like the way that a layout of an area is.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just go into the editor and change things up. So yeah, it's like that balance. It's tedious, and
Gotcha.
it just doesn't stop.
And I think like the actual answer to your question is playtesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like testing the ever living fuck out of this thing, and just constantly, like, every time anything changes, getting all of us together and like actually running through all the playable game together as often as possible.
It's hitting a point where that's hard though, because it's like it gets longer, and then we're like, well, now we have to do this session and not do this.
But you just have to test so much. You have to play the game. If you're not playing the game, you can't feel what's fun.
Right. That makes sense. When you're, creating, when you're deciding, oh, I want the weapon to sound like this, or when you maybe have a walking sound or an unlock sound, like when you're doing that, what goes into it for you? Like some of the weapon strikes, do you try to have like a harder thud to show impact and such like that?
Yeah.
Like when you're designing sound, like what goes into it?
Graham, you got this one?
Yeah, sound guy.
Yeah, I'm doing all the sound effects, all the music and stuff. So like we've had some iterations on sounds for fighting in particular, and I think like 3-4 months ago, something like that, we really just tried to beef up everything about combat to make every impact, every hit, the flashes, to just have way more juice and meat behind it. So like for some of the weapon sounds, for example, like each step of a weapon combo, like the club swings have like what I think 4 swings or 5 swings to the combo. Each swing itself has 2 variations to it, and combo 1 has a lower pitch noise and it keeps getting higher and higher pitch, but like the thuddiness and the bassiness of the hits get meatier and meatier as you get further into the combo, that sort of thing. Literally today, I added a unique sound for when you kill an enemy. So that final hit that actually gets their health to 0. So like these kind of small details just really give player feedback on how well they're performing and gives them that juice that makes a game feel like makes attacks feel like they have more weight to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like things like changing the pitch from one attack to the next attack, like having this rising action essentially within the sounds built into them themselves helps with that. I don't know. What else did you ask about sounds?
Just kind of like when you're like, that's music. Like what kind of emotion, I guess, you're trying to bring out in a level, or just kind of like when you look at Michael Relic, what do I want this person to feel? Like how do you go about,
Yeah. I feel like my approach with the music is like it's create the music first and then feel the emotion and decide where in the game that emotion best fits. It's less about like, oh, I need to make a song for this zone. I'm going to try and capture that vibe with my first attempt on a track. It's like I just create a bunch of random songs or like small sections of songs, like maybe like 15 to 30 seconds of a song that has 20 different instruments in it or something, and then I get a general idea of what the vibe of that song is, and then I can say, oh, like that vibe fits this zone, and I'll just have a backlog of different sounds and music and instruments and combinations of all of these things all put together. And I can sort of pick and choose, like, oh, let me just go through my catalog. It's like, I need music for this dungeon. Let me like see what I have that's sort of unfinished, and then I can add a couple layers to it of the music and get it to fit that. But like, I'm also trying to challenge myself with the music a little bit by reducing the amount of like standard Western instruments that you might find in like orchestra or band instruments. Like, I'm not using a lot of or really any like pianos. We have a meme about I'm not using any Western instruments. Okay. But yeah, it's I'm just trying to like use that as sort of a challenge to like find really unique virtual instruments or like real life instruments and different sounds and combine them that aren't things that you'd find in orchestra or band instruments, something that you'd see normally in like big scores. I want to find weird Asian and African and I have like Japanese and Southeast Asian and Chinese instruments that I'm using. I have African drums, Middle Eastern stringed instruments, that sort of stuff.
What is the
Native American?
What is the bazantar?
The bazantar is
what
like it's a giant stand-up bass. I think that's close to a Western instrument, but it has resonating strings underneath it that function like a sitar would in Indian music. So it's like a bowed or plucked giant stand-up bass or a double bass. But then it's like it's custom made. It's like it was manufactured by one dude. It's not a like a mass produced instrument, but it just sounds really cool. It's like it's got all these extra strings inside of the instrument that like resonate along
Mm-hmm.
with a single stroke of the bow on it. Yeah, it's like there's all sorts of funky instruments that I've found through researching different companies that make like virtual instruments and plugins and sample libraries and stuff. I just play around with them. I make way more tracks than I actually will end up using in my Go Relic, but I that also gives me like a catalog of just different sort of samples of music and vibes that I've made for myself. When I'm ready to like fit a new song into a different zone, it's like I just sift through that and find the vibe that fits. And
Got
that's been
you.
pretty fun to do.
Okay. You just got like a huge backlog to just pull from.
Yeah, none of it's finished. None of it's finished, and I can't export it as any songs
That's all right.
until I really flesh it out. But like some of the tracks that are in Micro Relic, like the obviously like in the open world environments, I would
Mhm.
like players to have this feeling and sense of like expanse and exploration and some big area, something that doesn't like necessarily drive them to go in one particular direction, but
Mhm.
to influence the player to be like, oh, I can go anywhere I want.
So
So it's go for it.
are you inspired by like, music from other games or movies or anything? Do you have like a inspiration, like a top
David
three or
has
something?
inspirations.
I don't listen to music at all.
Oh, wow, the sound guy that doesn't listen to music. All right, that's new.
Like my personal music tastes are not it's not the kind of music that I make in video games.
That's understandable.
There definitely are times where it's like I made music for like a dungeon area in the game and I was like, what vibe do I want? I want this to be like a puzzle because the
Mhm.
dungeon is a puzzle, but it's also like underground and this like dank cave that humans haven't been in thousands of years or something. And so it's like this abandoned puzzle made of some magic pillars. And so it's like, what vibe does that kind of fit? And I thought of like, oh, Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, that sort of thing. Like their dungeons where you unlock the abilities or like get the what are those called? It's like how you can get upgrades in the newer Breath of the Wild and
Little
Tears of the
Yeah,
Kingdom.
orb things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like yeah, I just pulled up music from that game on YouTube
got you.
and just listened to it for, a day and then kind
Got you.
of got my head in that space and like paid attention to the little background jingles and little bells and small whistles that you hear in the back. It's like
Mhm.
I get the vibe now. And so it's really just about like trying to get my head into a certain space about what an area feels like and then I just play around with different instruments in my music software until I can kind of replicate that same feeling.
Got you. Got you.
But I'm not actively listening to video game music all the time.
Oh, I didn't mean all the time. I just kind of
Yeah.
thought you had like I got a top three that kind of does it for me, and it's like, inspires me to make my own.
Yeah, it's really the games that have resonated with me personally.
Gotcha.
Whether it's ones that I've drawn inspiration from on like a design perspective or just like something that was really nostalgic to me or whatever it might be. But I'll just kind of pick and choose and listen to soundtracks from certain games and be like, okay, I get this vibe. It's really nice. And then I can
Gotcha.
sort of lean in that direction.
Would you say Michael Relic is narrative based or more open world, or is it like if you want to explore, you can, but if you want to just go straight through the story, you can.
It's just gameplay. It's like I feel like gameplay is the major thing that like makes up the foundation
Definitely
for the
not
game.
narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the narrative is more or less the player's experience with a specific area, or if they're stuck on a specific boss, or what they
Okay.
decide to use. Like they kind of attribute what if they dig, they can find kind of like pieces that would tell a story about what's going on.
Mhm.
But in general, I'm not going to be forthright with that. It's going to be more reserved,
Okay.
and it's more. I would consider it like more of an open world style like not sandbox in like the tag sense, but sandbox as in like I'm gonna choose how I overcome this problem. But the
Mhm.
problems are probably fairly linear in that it's like this boss needs to be beaten, that boss needs to be beaten. The sandbox would be like the build of the character, like the RPG style build of what the player wants to do.
Okay.
and how they want to express like their movement and like how they want to like what gear they want to equip.
So is there a wrong way to play the game, so to speak?
Refunding is wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a really interesting question. I think there's a lot of games that you can play and be in like kind of the wrong mode of play.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. I guess when I say wrong, it's kind of like we said earlier, Tears of the Kingdom. If you know how, you can go straight to the final boss, but you
Mhm.
probably shouldn't do that. I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's kind of my word choice. Is Michael Relic sort of like that? Like if you can just
And I
go,
sequence break with weird tech, if that makes sense. Like Morrowind has like the scroll of Icarian flight, which if you don't know is like this consumable, and you fly, but you like launch yourself into the sky and then are beholden to gravity afterwards.
Just because you can jump high doesn't mean
Yeah,
you cancel fall damage.
you're right.
Unless you jump towards water. Like I would say like it's a game where you can be we want to make a game where you can be creative.
Got
And if
you.
you're creative and you want to break the systems of the game, like
Mhm.
I think we encourage that.
Mhm.
And it's our job as designers to try to make as many of those options fun as possible.
But at the same time, it's like there are design intentions. Like,
Yeah.
for example, I decided to take up the spear and not the club.
Mhm.
But then I decided to spec my points into strength and not dexterity. And if you hover your mouse over the spear, it says this scales with dexterity. But people can decide that they don't want to put points into dexterity,
Yeah.
even though the weapon they chose to fight with needs dexterity.
Right.
So it's like, how do we as developers describe to the player, hey, if this is the weapon you're using, you better put points into this thing and not this other thing? But it's like players can choose to do it the wrong way, and it'll be more challenging for them because they didn't put points into the thing that supported the weapon they're using. Or we could not allow the player to use that weapon if they didn't put points into this thing.
Yeah. It begs a lot of questions about it's like, is that problem that we failed to communicate well enough, or is that problem that the person who's playing the game is playing the game from the wrong perspective? I think it's somewhere in the middle where it's like
A little bit of both.
we kind of like it when you play any game for the first time, like you really should be trying to pay attention.
Right.
And there's lots of games that are successful because you can just turn your brain off the first time you play it and it just works.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely nothing wrong with those games. Like they're good for a reason. But I do think like Myco Relic exists in that genre of games where like ideally when you're learning it, like you're learning and you're paying attention and like you're actually reading the stuff that you see on screen,
Gotcha.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. Another wrong way of playing our game is button mashing. Like you can't just open up the menu or the UI or the inventory and just start spamming buttons.
Yeah.
It's like it's not gonna work. So yeah, it's like sure there are wrong ways to play most any game, I suppose. But yeah, it's partially our responsibility to kind of focus the perspective of how the player should be thinking about things when they pick up our game for the first time. But it's also a matter of like target audience, It's like if you've never played an RPG before in your life and you don't know what stats or skill trees are or skill points and how to put points into different weapons and that sort of thing, it's like the learning curve is just going to be steeper.
Right.
Sure.
That makes sense. No, it's early and you still focused on Myco Relic, but what would you want Myco Relic as a like whole to be? Would you want it to be a series like Myco Relic 2, Myco Relic DLC, Myco Relic mobile? Like what would be, what do you guys want for Myco Relic?
I feel like Graham should answer this one because he hasn't talked as much.
Okay, so I think it's a difficult question because okay, so the thing about making a sequel is that you already have fans of the original game.
Got you.
And those people are probably going to buy your sequel.
Mm.
However, I will say that there's features and things that I have had to leave behind that I would really like to bring in. One of those things is that the game actually started with this idea that you would kind of build this like a village, and then you would have like these robots come join your village, and then they would like help you with stuff. Like crafting or what have you, and there would be kind of objectives surrounding that. That whole system has been kind of scrapped because it was just too much to chew. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like, how do I fit this in with this sort of like RPG style of things? And it's also like that type of game kind of alienates one part of the fan base, and the other part where it's like this sort of action RPG style of game would alienate the other side of the fan base. Like that's the problem with like genre mix-ups.
Mhm.
But I think we've sort of engineered the way that we build levels in a way that I think we could make like a modular island and either release like DLC in that format or release like free updates in that format.
Gotcha.
But in general, I think like the other thing that we're fighting is like we're using Unreal Engine 4 and it's the stable build of Unreal Engine 4. But the problem is everything is moving to Unreal Engine 5. And like a lot of the plugins that we're used to using are dropping support, or like they're like moving on to Unreal 5, and it's hard to get them to give you, I guess, like answers about stuff just because they're working on that. So I think that if we were going to make a sequel, I would revisit those features that I've left behind. But we also have a few other ideas for games that would be kind of like a similar vibe, but maybe a different theme or a different story or like a different universe. But I think in general... Wait, what were you going to say?
No, I was saying that answered my second question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we know like yet.
Yeah, I understand.
There's a lot jumbling around. There's like a lot of potential paths we could go, but
Of course, like a sequel sounds like it could be so much fun, because if we can bring in these village building ideas into a similar world where we can sort of see this vision of mushroom robot tribes where you're assembling little villagers together and like using them to craft weapons and armor and stuff.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that. But like Graham said, it's like we have ideas for essentially smaller projects too. It's like Myco Relic has been in the making now for what, like 3+ years, or just a little over 3 years, something like that. And so like a lot of that first year and a half has been just us learning how to make a video game. Not in somebody else's modded already existing game. We're using Unreal Engine. We're not using somebody else's homebrewed software. So like it would be really cool if we could just make a project in a year too. Something that would just give us a quick thing to chew on and make a fun game together. That isn't this like 3-4 year long process of learning how to make a game and making all of these islands.
Yeah.
It's cool that we can think about what we've learned making Myco Relic and consider how that could be condensed into this like sterile, really short, more fun experience too.
I mean, obviously we intend to support the game.
Yeah.
Like that has to be done, and that's just inevitable, especially considering it's sort of this semi-complex multiplayer game. Although we won't have servers or anything like that. It's more of a co-op thing, like peer-to-peer. It still kind of warrants this. The expectation of the players nowadays, in my opinion, is that if a game has multiplayer like that, it's a live service game. And you actually saw that with the Valheim devs, where a lot of players were like disappointed that they weren't getting seasonal updates and like battle pass type content. And it's funny to me that that's kind of the default mode of play now, is like this idea that you are making a live service. Like every experience is a service, and not just I'm going to buy a game and play it. It's like I'm going to buy a game and then I'm going to get this update and then I'm going to get this thing, and then it's like they're going to balance it and push it. And that's just the nature of how we deliver the product. Like, you know, GameCube games, you can't live hotfix like anything on the GameCube. Like that's not how it worked.
You got what you got.
Yeah, exactly.
on that
So,
little disc.
Like you kind of see how that has affected the games industry. Nobody hires playtesters, or if they do, it's in limited capacity. Whereas I think like in the golden age of gaming, which is what we're kind of inspired by, which in my mind is like 1998 to 2005, like that's kind of like they had dedicated playtesters. They had like a whole QA process. Whereas now I think that burden has been pushed onto like early access players, or even like 1.0 live service players, because it's a live service game and there's bugs. It's like,
yeah, live service in general. It's crazy like that. But the barrier to entry to make games in general is so much lower now than it was in that golden age.
Oh
too.
yeah,
it's like
we're fighting that too.
Yeah.
It's like we benefit from that, but we also are every year more games come out on Steam than last year. So it's like that's the trajectory.
What were the stats? It was like 15% of players' time on Steam was spent playing games that were released in 2024.
I didn't hear that.
I think it was like this year, 15% of players' time was spent on games made this year. And then the rest of that time, the 85% of time was playing games made 2023 and before.
Yeah, that indicates that the market is larger now anyway, like just by default.
For sure.
Because that would be like cumulative hours. So yeah, but
Roblox. And Lego Fortnite.
The kids are going on dates in Roblox.
That's right. Not Minecraft anymore?
No,
what happened to Minecraft dates?
Minecraft's gone.
I saw a wedding in World of Warcraft.
Minecraft is still kicking, and it's like all of those Chromebook kids and the iPad kids where they have like Chromebooks at school, they're just playing Minecraft all day.
Wow, Roblox.
Yeah.
A lot of Roblox. At least with my nieces. So much Roblox.
Lots of Roblox and Robux. Oh my god.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's kind of gross.
You know, with the playtesting, what kind of how's your reception to the game been so far? Like,
I think people who are fans of this genre and they like the art style,
mhm,
if those two things are met, meaning they know Dark Souls, they know the Souls-like genre,
mhm,
and they like what they see initially, those people are generally very hyped.
gotcha.
They might have feedback about the balance, they might have feedback about different mechanics that would be cool, but in general, those people are very hyped and they like playing and they like giving us feedback and stuff like that. I would say right now our median playtime for the playtest is like 45 minutes, which is actually pretty good. Like statistically, if you look at other games on Steam, I think the average for an indie developer for their demo, the average playtime is like something like 12 minutes or something like that. Like the average median playtime for all indie developers is somewhere in like the 12 to 15 minute range. So we're exceeding that by like a factor of 4. And like the way I see it is like people like playing our game, and the multiplayer aspect of that I think adds to it. Although I will say the multiplayer aspect of it also makes it harder to develop. To kind of reiterate on your previous question about like how hard it is to make a multiplayer game, I would say it's like you just have to work twice as much because you have to make sure that it works on the server and the client and then test all these different scenarios, and then there's always a bug that is like you just didn't think about. But that also gives us the benefit of like when someone plays this game and they want to play it with their friend, they can just get their friend to play it.
Gotcha.
And like that works really well for playtesting. It works well for marketing because I think that's like games are social in my opinion. Like obviously I play games that are single player sometimes, but in general, the stuff that I've really sunk a lot of time into has been stuff that I can play with my friends, and that kind of like parallel play of like we're both playing the same game but like in slightly different spaces, but also like the constructive play of like we're both achieving the same goal and we have to work together. And those two modes of play I think are what we're kind of design wise implementing in Micro Relic, where we want there to be these spaces that are kind of exploratory open world, but we also want there to be spaces that are like focused dungeon experiences where you have to lock in, and it would be best if you had a friend with you to cooperate.
Gotcha.
And then to take it a bit further, the other philosophy we have is to make mechanics that are quote unquote sticky, like stuff that sort of forces you to work together if you're playing in co-op. So for example, going down and then a mushroom pops out of you and you have to like interact with it and get your friend off the ground so they can stand back up. Like that kind of thing. Or if everybody goes down, then you wipe and you have to start over. Like that's kind of the bread and butter of the constructed dungeon experience.
Like something you asked about earlier with balancing. So like if I'm playing with 3 of my friends, so there's 4 of us in the server together, and I go into a dungeon by myself, boy, are those enemies going to be really hard to fight by myself, because that area is balanced for 4 people right now. So I got to be like, yo, guys, can you come over here and help me out? This is hard. Or like Graham was talking about the wiping mechanic and the mushroom popping out. Like that's hugely inspired by particularly like Destiny 1, which 10 years old now.
Like strikes and raids in Destiny.
Yeah, where like if your friend goes down, you can run over to where his body's at and like pick him back up and continue the run. Yeah,
Like that's kind of I think we're still iterating on like different like magic types and different mechanics, but in general, I think most of the stuff we want to add, like I always ask the question, all right, how does this work within the context of multiplayer? How can I make this more interesting for people that are playing cooperatively? So for example, like we have this sort of like AoE stomp spell where you just like smash the ground, and then what we added recently was if that hits one of your teammates, like if they're standing in it, it actually like resonates and like pops off of them too. So it's like,
Okay.
and that's been, I think it's fun because it's like it encourages you to kind of like stay together.
Yeah.
But the other thing I kind of want to do as well is like make sure people are aware of positioning within like their group, and like not specifically not hitting each other, not in terms of like PvP damage, but we've kind of added like a stagger, so it's like I can still stagger you, so it's better for me to like think about like, okay, I'm gonna attack and then I'm gonna like go this way and then you're gonna come in and attack and like keep the damage up. So it's kind of those, we're trying to balance that, like how that works in multiplayer, because it's definitely, that's more work than it would be just if we're thinking about, all right, one player, one boss. It's like multiple players, one boss, or how do I make the boss fight more interesting if there's like 5 people?
Got you.
Yeah, it's not just a matter of increasing enemies' health bars every time another player joins the server. Like, we want to actually change the way that an enemy encounter layout is, where all the enemies are positioned and what type of enemy spawns there. Maybe phases with the bosses, or even like introducing ads into a boss encounter sometimes. Like, certain bosses will have ads. Like, we can increase the number of ads, the difficulty of them, how many of them spawn, that sort of thing.
Okay. I have is a common theme you guys been saying. Why mushroom?
They're cool, man. Mushrooms. They look really cool. They're pretty. They're all around the world.
The mushrooms weren't there initially because, like, I think like it started with the whole like Bionicle idea, and I think it was a mixture of like all of us end up getting fed the same YouTube algorithm. So like we were all fed like mushroom stuff for a period of time, and it is kind of like, it's like if you're trying to figure out like how do I have robots that struggle with consciousness, like having mushrooms actually be like what the conscious part is, and then like it's inhabiting the robot body, like that's a pretty easy pick in terms of like if you're trying to figure out like your lore. I think that's really why. It's like it makes the most sense, and then like it just has a really strong aesthetic. Like it's very easy for me to think like, okay, if I want to like theme something for the game, how do I just make it more like a mushroom or more like a robot? And it sort of like helps you, it's an easy guiding force for you. So I don't know, it's like, yeah,
That's that you answered it.
Nice.
You honestly, you guys have really hit pretty much all my questions. Honestly, you have anything you want to share? You want us to know, whether it's a secret, whether it took me 13 hours just to make this character walk for the first time. like this is, let us know.
I honestly don't. I can't. Nothing's top of mind other than I feel like this part of my life has been the best so far.
Yeah.
And like that's, I think I couldn't have done it without you guys. So
Yeah. We're all fully, I don't know, it feels like we're jumping off a cliff together and we're checking each other's parachutes.
Oh no,
you guys have parachutes.
It's up to us to pull each other's parachute string.
Seriously though, this is like you know when you watch like a raindrop go down the glass, and it's like they tend to take the path of least resistance. And I feel like in a vast majority of cases in your life, you should always take the path of least resistance. But like this has definitely been one of those periods for us where it feels like we're like deciding what direction we want to go in our lives. And that's been just like fucking empowering, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, no, like I'm gonna actually try to do this thing that I've dreamed about since I was a kid.
I never once in my entire life thought I would start a company and like manage an LLC and like be this entrepreneur type of like, yo, like let me post on Twitter and
God.
and Reddit and like get followers and subscribe. Like that's not my thing. I'm not that guy. But like doing this together with John and Graham, it's like it's sick. It's like I just never I'm turning into a different human being because I get this team to work with that's like they inspire me and I inspire them, and we're just like we're figuring out this path where it's like we want to see this thing succeed, and it's greater than the sum of its parts, I think is a good way to put it. It's like none of us would have been capable of doing what we're doing now if we were alone, but it's like
that's true.
Yeah, like we're parachutes, man.
There are no parachutes.
No, I'm tricking myself.
He said, aim for the bushes.
Yeah, aim for the bushes. Shoot for the moon, and you fail, you land amongst the bushes.
Casted scroll of a Kyrian flight. Little magic hands, and then we jumped, and we're just hoping we landed the one.
Yeah, pretty much. No, it's been a really interesting journey for us to do this whole like starting a company and doing social media posts and like doing a podcast, you know, this sort of thing. It's like
I feel like most of the decisions in my life, like the major decisions that I've made in my life, I feel like this has been the end goal, is getting to this point. But it's like at the same time, you can't ignore the fact that the journey to get there is more important than the end. It's like that's kind of the like I live by that, where it's like you have to trust the process and you have to focus on making incremental changes to that process until you are more or less rolling on your way to where you want to go.
Got you.
And I feel like although there have been many road bumps and blocks and like detours, it's like more or less like I know how to code because I wanted to get to this point in my life. I didn't pick that because I wanted to like become a programmer so I could work for Apple or whatever. Like I've wanted to make games literally since I started playing them. And it's like this is where we're at now. Like we're actually doing it, and it's kind of it's almost like a weird spiritual experience getting to this point. It's very real.
Got you.
I am euphoric.
Really, I'm just terrified.
I mean, you know, it's scary. Like there's a reason why people don't quit their job and make a video game. Like,
it's true. Yeah.
Look,
it's terrifying.
my medical problems haven't come back, so I'm doing all right.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Just don't get any new ones while you
Right.
don't have health insurance.
Right. They don't know that yet. You guys want to pay for my health insurance? Hit me up. But buy the game, okay? Yeah, because we're not doing any sort of like crowdfunding or like kickstarting or anything like that. We're just like we want to make the game and sell it to people, and that's it. Just buy the game and enjoy what we're doing.
Got you. So was some, I don't want to say creating a video game, but was something dealing with video games always the end goal for you for you individually? Like whether it was designing, whether it was I got a song on there, whether I voice acted, whether I made my own, was it video games? Something dealing with video games always the end goal?
For me, I don't even think it was a goal. I think it was like this, like not even an obsession, but it just kind of flows out of me. Like it's like constantly every time I play something new or every time I'm like I've always thought about like, okay, what if I were to make a game, what would I make? And I've had like multiple ideas since I could literally write and draw, and like it's like that's just how it's been. But I don't think it was really realized until we started making the mod, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
Yeah. Like it's like that's
2012, 13.
Like I've always dabbled in it, but it's never really taken hold until we had that project, and then we just kind of kept rolling into new things.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of memories of like playing RuneScape and then like writing notes about how I wished I was the guy who made RuneScape, and if I was gonna make it, this is what the sword would, the fucking dragon longsword would look like, and you know. But and like I remember like using a lot of map makers in different games growing up.
For sure.
But actually thinking like, okay, this is what I would like to do. I don't even know if I can professionally. I don't know if this isn't really professional. It doesn't feel
professional. You're professional. It's yours. You got a company.
Yeah, we're on a podcast.
So it's like a frog in the boiling water. Like you feel like you're just kind of making it up as you go along until you hit a point where you're like, wait, we have how many wish lists?
It's
like,
just me and the
there's
boys.
actually people that are like putting us in their festivals and stuff. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, but I think it wasn't for me. It wasn't until well, I don't know. I think there was some point in college or before college. Well, okay, so I went to school for business originally.
Same.
And then like Graham and I got talking and Graham was like, "Yo, do you want to get a CS degree and make video games?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." So like it wasn't really until then for me that I thought, okay, yeah, I thought I wanted to make films. And then,
it's never too late.
yeah, I mean, it could always happen, but I do think like the medium of games from both a work perspective, because like the idea of working on a set at a specific time of day and yada, 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 I don't love as much as I love just like sit down at your workstation and do the thing. But also like games are just, they're more, I want to be careful. It's not that games are magically better, but they're capable of doing things that other forms of media can't do. Yeah. And I'm attracted to that.
Yeah.
Got you.
It's that degree of like interaction and manipulation that you have in the middle of the rising action and the experience of what happens when you're playing a game. It's like you are the one responsible for it. You're not just sitting back and letting it happen to you.
Right. I am the protagonist.
I am.
Right. The village will burn, or I'll save it. It just depends on how I'm feeling.
This chicken will die.
Or I'll save it. It just depends on how I'm feeling today. Okay.
You quick save and all the NPCs nearby.
Yeah. I love those memes where a guy quick saves and everyone's like, hold on, what's he doing?
Okay. Well, that's all my questions. I don't want to keep you guys too long, but if you have anything else you want to share, please share it with us. And if not, we're gonna wrap it up. So
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. We're just chilling. I don't think any
Okay.
of us have like
The three of us are getting married.
next
Congratulations. Married to each other, married at the same time. Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. I'll be in the front row. Yeah.
Singular marriage, dude. Yeah.
It's your brother now.
Congratulations.
But don't let this be your last time on here, guys. You're always welcome here. It doesn't have to be to promote a game. If you want to come and chit chat, if you want to come just hang out sometime, talk shop, talk video game, talk about what you got going on in your life, this is the place to do it. I'm always available. I appreciate you guys for coming on.
Absolutely.
Everybody, thank you for coming. Everybody that was lurking in the back or you active in the chat, thank you. Be blessed and prosperous, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, gang.
Thank you.